My name is Evelyn, and I'm 37 years old. I built my dream home from the ground up as an architect, a sanctuary overlooking the Pacific. For 15 years, my family excluded me from every gathering, every holiday, every celebration. They mocked my ambitions and career. Now, in a twist of fate, I never imagined they're living under my roof after losing everything. The same luxury home they ridiculed is now their shelter. I'm still processing how to feel about this full circle moment. Before I share my story, where are you watching from today? Hit that like button and subscribe if you've ever had to rebuild a relationship after years of hurt. I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood in suburban Chicago in a brick house with white shutters and a perfectly manicured lawn. My father Richard was the regional manager at a banking firm, and my mother Margot was a high school English teacher. They were practical people who valued stability, tradition, and following well-established paths to success. From my earliest memories, my older brother Thomas was the golden child of our family. 4 years older than me, he followed my father's footsteps with an interest in business and finance. His report cards were displayed proudly on the refrigerator, his trophies from baseball and debate teams showcased in the living room cabinet. My parents beamed whenever he talked about his plans to attend business school and eventually take over my father's position at the bank. I was different from the beginning. While Thomas played sports and joined business clubs, I was captivated by buildings. I would spend hours sketching structures, creating miniature models from cardboard boxes, and reading books about famous architects. I was fascinated by how spaces could make people feel, how light could transform a room, how form and function could dance together in perfect harmony. "Buildings don't pay the bills, Evelyn," my father would say whenever he caught me working on my sketches. "It's a nice hobby, but you need to think about a real career." My mother wasn't much better. "Sweetheart, why not consider teaching like me? It's reliable, and you'll have summers off when you have children." The only person who truly encouraged my passion was my grandmother Lillian, my mother's mother. A former art teacher with a bohemian spirit that never quite aligned with my parents' conventional values, Grandma Lillian would slip me architecture magazines and books during her visits. "Your eyes light up when you talk about buildings, Evelyn," she told me once while we sat in her garden. "Never let anyone dim that light. The world needs people who are passionate about creating beautiful things." When I was 12, my art teacher entered one of my architectural designs in a regional middle school competition. To my shock and delight, I won first place. The award ceremony was scheduled for a Saturday afternoon in May. "We'll be there, sweetie," my mother promised, patting my hand. But 2 days before the ceremony, Thomas made it to the state baseball championship. There was no discussion about the conflict. "Thomas has worked so hard for this," my father explained as they packed the car for the 3-hour drive to the championship game. "You understand, don't you? We'll celebrate your art thing when we get back." I sat alone at the awards ceremony, watching other kids accept their certificates with beaming parents taking photos. When they called my name for first place, Grandma Lillian was the one who cheered from the back of the room. She had taken 3 buses to get there after I called her in tears. The pattern continued throughout high school. I excelled in math, physics, and design classes, all crucial for my architectural aspirations. My achievements were acknowledged with distracted nods, while Thomas's business internship and college applications dominated dinner conversations. During my junior year of high school, Grandma Lillian's health began to fail. I visited her every weekend, often sketching building designs while sitting at her bedside. During one of my visits, she handed me an envelope. "I've been saving this for years," she said, her voice weak but determined. "For your education. Use it to follow your dreams, Evelyn." Inside was a bank book showing savings of nearly $45,000. I was speechless. "Don't tell your parents just yet," she whispered with a wink. "This is between us dreamers." Grandma Lillian passed away 2 months later. At the funeral, I stood silent and grief-stricken while my mother lamented that her mother had never been practical about money and had probably left nothing behind. I applied to architecture programs in secret, using the computer at the public library. When my acceptance letter from one of the top architecture programs in the country arrived with a partial scholarship, I finally gathered the courage to tell my parents. Architecture. My father frowned over his newspaper. Evelyn, do you have any idea how competitive that field is, and how few women succeed in it? Your father's right, my mother added, and that school is so far away. What about something closer to home? Something more suitable? The final straw came during Thomas's engagement party the summer before I left for college. Relatives gathered in our backyard congratulating my brother and his fiancée, Amanda. When my aunt asked about my plans, my mother quickly changed the subject to Thomas's new job offer. Later, when a family friend mentioned hearing about my architecture scholarship, my father laughed. Oh, Evelyn's going through an artistic phase. We'll see how long that lasts when she discovers how hard the real world is. I left for college 2 weeks later with Grandma Lillian's savings, my partial scholarship, and a determination to prove them all wrong. The University of Michigan's architecture program was everything I had dreamed of and more. For the first time in my life, I was surrounded by people who spoke my language, who understood my passion for creating spaces, who valued my perspective and ideas. The campus itself was an architectural wonderland, from the historic Law Quad to the modern Ross School of Business building, each structure telling its own story. My roommate Jasmine was a vibrant interior design major from Seattle with an infectious laugh and unwavering confidence. She took one look at my carefully preserved collection of architectural magazines and declared, "You and I are going to create amazing things together someday." In Design Studio, I met David, a thoughtful architecture student from California, who challenged and complimented my ideas. The three of us formed a tight-knit group, spending late nights in the studio debating design principles and supporting each other through the rigorous program. This is what family feels like. I realized one night as we shared pizza at 2 a.m. surrounded by models and drawings for our midterm projects. The first major holiday away from home wasn't planned. I had intended to return to Chicago for Thanksgiving, but a heated phone call with my father changed everything. "You need to declare a more practical major while you still can," he insisted, after I shared my excitement about a project that had received high praise from my professors. "Dad, I'm excelling in architecture. My professors say I have real talent." "Talent doesn't pay student loans, Evelyn. This selfishness has gone on long enough." Selfishness? The word stung. How is following my passion selfish? Because you're choosing a fantasy over practicality, over your family's wisdom. I stayed on campus for Thanksgiving, joining Jasmine and other stranded students for a potluck in the dorm lounge. The freedom from my family's disapproval felt like a weight lifted, even as a new sadness settled in my heart. During my sophomore year, I met Professor Wilson, a renowned architect, who had returned to teaching after a successful career designing public spaces around the world. After class one day, he asked to see my portfolio. "You have a unique eye, Evelyn," he said, flipping through my sketches. "You see how spaces affect people, not just how they look on paper. That can't be taught." Professor Wilson became the mentor I had craved. He challenged me to push boundaries, to think beyond conventional design, and to find my voice as an architect. More importantly, he believed in me with a certainty that my parents had never shown. At the end of my junior year, I landed a competitive summer internship with a sustainable design firm in Chicago. I called home with the news, hoping finally for some recognition. "That's nice, dear," my mother said distractedly. "Did you hear Thomas and Amanda are expecting you'll be an aunt by Christmas?" When I returned home for the internship, I lived in a small apartment near the firm rather than staying with my parents. The distance felt necessary for my sanity. I worked 60-hour weeks absorbing everything I could about sustainable materials, energy-efficient designs, and the business side of architecture. My family invited me to Sunday dinners occasionally, but conversation inevitably turned to Thomas's promotion, Thomas's new house, or Thomas's impending fatherhood. My internship was dismissed as drawing pictures, despite the fact that I was working on actual projects for actual clients. Thomas's elaborate wedding took place that summer. As the only bridesmaid from his side among Amanda's 6 friends, I already felt out of place. At the reception, I discovered I'd been seated not at the family table, but with distant cousins I barely knew. When I asked my mother about it, she seemed flustered. The planner had to balance the tables, dear. Don't make a fuss on your brother's special day. I returned to school for my senior year, with a growing realization my family had created a narrative about me that no achievement could change. In their story, I was the impractical dreamer, the daughter who chose a fantasy over their practical wisdom. My success threatened that narrative, so it had to be minimized or ignored. I graduated with honors, my final project selected for the university's showcase exhibition. My parents attended the ceremony, sitting stiffly in their formal clothes, clapping politely when my name was called. At lunch afterward, surrounded by my beaming professors and excited classmates, my father cleared his throat. "Well, you've gotten this out of your system now. I suppose there are some small firms back in Chicago where you could work until you settle down." I looked at him, truly. Looked at the man who had never seen me and made a decision. "Actually, I've accepted a position with Jensen and Associates in Seattle. I start next month." My mother's fork clattered against her plate. "Seattle. But that's across the country." "Yes," I said, feeling a strange calm. "It is." As I packed up my apartment preparing for the move west, I realized I was building something new, a life defined by my choices, not my family's expectations. I had Jasmine and David Professor Wilson and colleagues from my internship who respected my work. I was creating my own chosen family while my blood relations grew more distant with each achievement they couldn't fit into their narrow vision of who I should be. The night before I left for Seattle, my mother called. "I don't understand why you need to go so far away," she said, her voice small. "Family should stay together." "I haven't felt like part of this family in a long time, Mom," I replied. The truth finally spoken aloud. The silence that followed said everything. Seattle greeted me with its iconic skyline, a mix of historic and ultra-modern architecture that immediately felt like home. Jensen and Associates was a mid-sized firm specializing in commercial and high-end residential projects known for innovative designs that harmonized with the Pacific Northwest landscape. My first months were challenging. As one of the few women in the firm, I faced subtle skepticism from some colleagues and outright dismissal from certain clients. During my initial presentation to a commercial developer, he interrupted me to ask if one of the senior architects could explain the structural details. "I am the architect assigned to your project, Mr. Reynolds," I replied calmly, "and I can assure you that every aspect of this design meets not only your requirements, but exceeds industry standards for sustainability and efficiency." I stayed late every night refining designs, learning the business side of architecture, and proving myself project by project. My mentor at the firm, senior architect James Landon, recognized my determination. "They always underestimate the quiet ones," he remarked after I successfully salvaged a project that was on the verge of collapse due to a client's last-minute changes. "But you've got steel in your spine, Evelyn." My first major success came 18 months into my tenure, when my design for a community arts center won a regional award for innovative public space. The Seattle Design Journal featured the project, praising its harmonious blend of functionality and inspiration. I sent the article to my parents, hoping finally for some acknowledgement. My father called a week later, but only to discuss Thomas's new promotion. The article went unmentioned. That December, I flew home for Christmas, my first visit in nearly a year. The holiday felt strained with conversation revolving around Thomas and Amanda's toddler son and my brother's expanding client base at the bank. When I mentioned my award-winning project, my mother nodded distractedly. "That's nice, dear. Did you see the new vacation photos Thomas and Amanda put up? They took little Richard to Disneyland." The pattern continued. My career advanced steadily, but my family's interest in my life diminished with each achievement. The following May, I received a call from Jasmine, who had moved to Portland after graduation. "Did you go to Chicago for your mom's 60th?" she asked. "What are you talking about?" "Your mom's birthday celebration. You mentioned it was coming up when we talked last month. A quick check of social media revealed photos of an elaborate garden party at my parents' home. Thomas and his family were there along with aunts, uncles, and family friends. I hadn't received an invitation. When I called my mother, she sounded flustered. "Oh, we didn't think you'd be able to come all the way from Seattle for just a birthday party. It was nothing special, really." The exclusion stung, but it was the dishonesty that hurt more deeply. This wasn't an oversight. It was a deliberate decision. During my next trip to Chicago for a client meeting, I arranged to have coffee with Thomas. We met at an upscale cafe near his office where he arrived 15 minutes late, in a tailored suit, already checking his watch. "I've only got 30 minutes before my next meeting," he said, signaling for the server. "What's so urgent?" "Why wasn't I invited to Mom's birthday?" I asked directly. Thomas sighed, looking uncomfortable. "Look, Evelyn, it's not personal." "Being excluded from family gatherings feels pretty personal, Thomas." He hesitated, then leaned forward. "The truth is, your success makes everyone uncomfortable. Dad built his whole identity around being the provider, the successful one. Mom's whole life has been supporting that narrative. And then there's you winning awards, being featured in magazines, living this independent life that challenges everything they believe about what women should do, about what success looks like. So I'm being punished for doing well in my chosen field. Not punished, just it's easier when you're not there reminding everyone that there are different paths. Dad doesn't know how to relate to you anymore. Mom doesn't understand your life choices. It's just easier." "Easier for whom?" I asked, but I already knew the answer. The pattern of exclusion became systematic. Thanksgiving invitations never materialized. Christmas plans were communicated last minute, making it impossible to arrange travel. Family weddings, anniversaries, and birthdays came and went, documented in social media posts I wasn't tagged in. My career continued its upward trajectory. At 30, I was promoted to junior partner at Jensen & Associates, after leading the design team for a high-profile sustainable office complex that garnered national attention. My professional circle expanded, and I found myself surrounded by colleagues who respected my vision and valued my contributions. It was at a sustainable architecture conference that I met Jackson Chen, a structural engineer whose innovative approach to earthquake-resistant design complemented my focus on sustainable materials. Tall, with thoughtful eyes and a quiet confidence, Jackson challenged my ideas while respecting my expertise. Our professional collaboration gradually evolved into friendship, then something deeper. "You see the world as it could be," he told me during a late dinner after we'd spent hours discussing a challenging project. "That's rare, Evelyn." For the first time, I was building a relationship with someone who saw me clearly and valued precisely the qualities my family had dismissed. The final breaking point with my family came after a particularly painful phone call with my mother. I had mentioned potentially bringing Jackson to the next family gathering, whenever that might be. "Oh," my mother said, her voice cooling noticeably. "Well, we wouldn't want you to feel obligated. Your life is so different from ours now. Sometimes I think you're not really part of the family anymore with your big career and your architecture awards." The words landed like a physical blow. Not really part of the family anymore. After a lifetime of trying to earn their approval while staying true to myself, my mother had finally said what their actions had been demonstrating for years. "Maybe you're right," I replied, surprising myself with the steadiness in my voice. "Maybe I'm not." That night I made a decision that would alter the course of my life. If my birth family couldn't accept me as I was, I would fully embrace the life and family I had chosen for myself. My colleagues, friends like Jasmine and David, and now Jackson, these were the people who supported my dreams and celebrated my successes. It was time to stop looking backward and build the future I wanted, quite literally. With 5 years as a junior partner under my belt, and a growing reputation in sustainable luxury design, I made a bold decision. I resigned from Jensen & Associates to establish my own firm, Evelyn Architecture. My focus would be creating homes and commercial spaces that married luxury with sustainability. proving that ethical design could also be beautiful and aspirational. The decision wasn't without risk, but I had carefully built a strong network and developed a portfolio that attracted clients immediately. Jackson supported my decision completely, offering both emotional encouragement and practical advice from his experience in engineering consulting. "You've outgrown working under someone else's name," he said as we celebrated the launch of my firm with champagne on the balcony of my apartment. "It's time the world saw your vision directly." My first major personal project began with a piece of land that took my breath away: 5 acres of oceanfront property north of Seattle, with soaring pines, dramatic cliffs, and a view of the water that changed with every shift of light. The moment I stood there, I knew this would be the site of my own home, a physical manifestation of everything I valued in design and life. I poured months into creating the perfect design, a modern structure of glass, sustainable wood, and local stone that would appear to emerge organically from the landscape. The home would feature floor-to-ceiling windows to capture the ocean views, geothermal heating, solar panels integrated into the architecture, and spaces designed for both solitude and gathering. "This isn't just a house," I explained to Jackson as we reviewed the plans. "It's a statement about what matters to me: connection to nature, sustainable innovation, creating spaces that nurture creativity and peace." The construction process was both exhilarating and challenging. I worked closely with every contractor, sourced materials from ethical suppliers, and problem-solved through inevitable setbacks. When unexpected bedrock complicated the foundation work, I redesigned elements to incorporate the natural feature, rather than fighting against it. When a shipment of specialized glass was delayed, I used the time to refine other aspects of the interior. Throughout the process, I documented the journey with photos and videos, initially for my own records, but eventually sharing them on professional social media. The project began attracting attention in architectural circles even before completion. In a moment of optimism, I sent a carefully curated selection of images to my parents, along with a note explaining the sustainable elements and the thinking behind the design. I hoped that seeing my vision taking physical form might finally help them understand my passion. My brother Thomas called a few days later. "Got your email with all the house pictures," he said, his tone dismissive. "Bit much, isn't it? Wasting all that money on a giant house for one person. Dad thinks you're trying to show off." "It's not about showing off, Thomas," I replied, fighting to keep my voice steady. "This house represents everything I've worked for professionally. It's a showcase of sustainable luxury design, which is what my firm specializes in." "Yeah, well, Mom says it looks cold with all that glass. Not very homey. Anyway, Amanda and I are looking at vacation properties in Florida. Now that's a sensible investment." My mother's email came next, a masterpiece of backhanded compliments and thinly veiled criticism. "Your house certainly looks impressive," she wrote. "So modern and showy. I suppose that's important in your field, though I wonder if you'll feel lonely in such a large space. Thomas and Amanda's home is much cozier, and of course, they need the space for the children." I deleted the email without responding and threw myself back into the construction process with renewed determination. This home wasn't for them. It was for me. It would stand as physical proof that I had built a successful life on my own terms. The house was completed in early autumn, a breathtaking harmony of modern design and natural elements. The main living area featured 20-foot ceilings with glass walls that showcased the ocean and forest. The kitchen combined professional-grade amenities with warm wood elements harvested from sustainable forests. My home office overlooked a small Japanese-inspired garden I had designed as a meditation space. The master bedroom suite captured both sunrise and sunset views, with a private deck where I could hear the waves at night. The completion coincided with my firm winning a major industry award for a public library project. Architectural Digest requested a feature on both my professional work and my new home. The resulting spread, titled "Sustainable Luxury: Evelyn Barrett's Vision," brought a flood of new clients and speaking invitations. I sent my parents a copy of the magazine. They never acknowledged receiving it. The housewarming party I hosted for friends, colleagues, and clients was a celebration of not just a completed building, but a life I had constructed deliberately and joyfully. Jasmine flew in from Portland, David came up from San Francisco, and former colleagues from Jensen and Associates toasted my success. To Evelyn, Professor Wilson said, having flown in as a surprise arranged by Jackson, who always saw possibilities others missed and had the courage to bring them to life. That evening, after the guests had departed, and Jackson and I stood on the main deck watching moonlight reflect on the water, I made one final attempt at connection with my birth family. I called my parents. "The house is finished," I said when my father answered. "I'd love for you and Mom to visit to see it in person. I could fly you out for a long weekend whenever works for your schedule." The pause was lengthy. "I don't think that's going to happen, Evelyn. Your mother and I don't much care for travel these days, and frankly, we don't understand this need of yours to flaunt your success." "This isn't about flaunting anything," I replied, feeling a familiar ache but also a new sense of finality. "It's about sharing my life with you, but I can't force you to be interested." "No," he agreed, "you can't." That conversation marked the end of my efforts to bridge the gap. The parents who had shaped my early years had made their choice and I had made mine. The estrangement was now complete, and strangely acknowledging that fact brought a certain peace. The constant hope for approval that had hummed in the background of my life finally fell silent. The next 5 years unfolded with a richness and fullness I had never experienced before. My architectural firm expanded to a team of 15 talented designers and support staff, taking on projects that aligned with our values of sustainable luxury and meaningful spaces. Industry recognition followed, including a prestigious national award for innovative use of sustainable materials. But the true joy came from the life I built outside of work. My home became a gathering place for the family I had chosen, friends who celebrated my successes without resentment, colleagues who shared my passion for design, and neighbors who became part of my everyday life. Jackson and I deepened our relationship, navigating the usual challenges with open communication and mutual respect. On a spring morning 2 years after I moved into the house, he proposed during a sunrise hike along the cliffs near our property. We married 6 months later in an intimate ceremony on the main deck of my home with the ocean as our backdrop and 50 of our closest friends in attendance. "Your grandmother would be so proud of you," Professor Wilson told me during the reception, his eyes misty. "Not just of what you've built, but of who you've become." The comment brought both joy and a bittersweet ache. I had sent wedding invitations to my parents and Thomas more as a final gesture than with any expectation they would attend. As expected, they declined with brief formal notes citing prior commitments. Together, Jackson and I created new traditions to replace those I had been excluded from for so long. Thanksgiving became an open house gathering for friends and colleagues who had nowhere else to go. Christmas Eve featured a potluck where everyone brought a dish representing their heritage or a special memory. Summer solstice meant a bonfire on the beach below our property, with music and stories lasting until dawn. These gatherings healed old wounds I hadn't even realized were still raw. Being able to host holidays my way, inclusive, joyful, without judgment, transformed my relationship with these occasions from painful reminders of exclusion to celebrations of the community I had built. My professional success continued to grow. The firm took on increasingly prestigious projects, from a sustainable luxury hotel in Napa Valley to a cutting-edge tech campus committed to zero carbon emissions. My design philosophy that beauty, functionality, and ethical considerations could exist in perfect harmony resonated in an industry increasingly concerned with environmental impact. Occasionally, news about my family reached me through distant connections. Thomas had been promoted to senior vice president at his bank. My parents had celebrated their 40th anniversary with a large party. A cousin mentioned in passing that my mother had health issues but had recovered. These snippets came without direct communication, like dispatches from a foreign country I once lived in, but could no longer visit. The emotional distance gave me space to work through my feelings with a therapist who specialized in family estrangement. Dr. Keller helped me understand that my family's rejection wasn't about my failings, but about their inability to expand their vision of success and family. You challenge their narrative, she explained during one session. Some families can adapt their story to include different paths. Others can't or won't. That's not a reflection on your worth. Through this work, I found myself able to acknowledge both the grief of what I had lost and the gratitude for what I had created instead. The anger that had once fueled my drive to prove them wrong gradually transformed into something calmer and more centered, a quiet confidence that I had made the right choices for my life. I channeled this healing into mentorship, establishing a program at my firm specifically for young women entering architecture. Remembering how isolated I had felt in my early career, I created the support system I wished I'd had, complete with professional guidance, networking opportunities, and emotional encouragement. You changed my entire perspective on what's possible in this field. One mentee told me after securing her first major project lead, "Seeing you succeed made me believe I could too." As Jackson and I approached our third anniversary, we began discussing starting a family of our own. The prospect of becoming parents sparked deep reflection on the family patterns I wanted to continue and those I was determined to break. Our children will grow up knowing they're supported in whatever passions they discover. I told Jackson one evening as we walked along the beach below our home. They'll never question whether their dreams are valid or whether they belong. It was around this time, on the 15th anniversary of my effective cutting off from family gatherings, that I found myself reflecting on the journey. The young woman who had left Chicago with determination and hurt had become someone I was proud to be successful on my own terms, surrounded by genuine love and support, creating spaces that reflected my values. The pain hadn't disappeared entirely. Family wounds rarely heal without leaving scars. But those scars had become part of my story rather than defining it. I had built a life that honored my grandmother's belief in me and my own vision of what was possible. I couldn't have imagined then how suddenly that hard-won peace would be disrupted, or that the family who had walked away from me would soon be walking through my front door asking for shelter in the very home they had once mocked. The call came on a rainy Tuesday afternoon in October. I was in my home office reviewing plans for a new project when Jackson appeared at the door, his expression concerned. "Your brother's on the phone," he said quietly. "He says it's important." For a moment, I couldn't process the information. Thomas hadn't called me directly in over 5 years. Our last interaction had been a terse exchange of texts when I sent a Christmas gift for his children that went unacknowledged. I took the phone with a strange sense of detachment. "Thomas, is everything okay?" His voice sounded different, strained, lacking the confident edge I remembered. "Evelyn, we need to talk. Something's happened." Over the next 20 minutes, Thomas outlined a situation so dire it seemed surreal. Our father's investment firm had collapsed after a series of increasingly risky ventures designed to maintain their lifestyle despite market downturns. The family was not only bankrupt, but facing potential legal issues related to client funds. "Dad leveraged everything," Thomas explained, his voice breaking. "The house, his retirement accounts, even Mom's inheritance. It's all gone. The bank is foreclosing at the end of the month." "What about your place?" I asked, still processing this unexpected reversal. A bitter laugh. "I invested heavily in Dad's firm, trusted him completely. Amanda and I lost almost everything. She's taken the kids to her parents in Michigan. Says she needs space to think about our future. That's code for consulting divorce lawyers." The silence stretched between us, 15 years of distance making this intimate crisis feel almost voyeuristic. "Why are you calling me now, Thomas?" I finally asked. Another long pause. "We have nowhere to go, Evelyn. Mom and Dad can't stay with me because I'm living in a one-bedroom apartment now. They're too proud to ask their friends for help. I remembered, I saw that magazine spread on your house. All that space. I thought maybe—" The implication hung in the air, simultaneously absurd and perfectly fitting in its irony. My family, who had systematically excluded me from their lives for 15 years, now needed shelter in the very home they had criticized as excessive and showy. "You want to stay here," I stated flatly. "All of you. Just until we figure things out," Thomas rushed to add. "A few months at most. Dad's meeting with bankruptcy attorneys. I'm interviewing for positions outside the financial sector. We just need a temporary solution." I looked out the window at the ocean waves crashing against the cliffs in a rhythm that had become the soundtrack to my most peaceful moments. The thought of disrupting the life Jackson and I had built here with the very people who had rejected me seemed impossible. "I need to think about this," I said finally. "And I need to talk to Jackson. This affects him too." "Of course," Thomas replied quickly. We're running out of options, Evelyn. And time." After hanging up, I sat in stunned silence until Jackson joined me, placing a hand gently on my shoulder. "They want to move in," I said, the words sounding absurd spoken aloud. "All of them. They've lost everything." Jackson pulled up a chair beside me. "What do you want to do?" It was the perfect question, not what should I do or what was the right thing to do, but what did I want? The distinction mattered. "Part of me wants to say no," I admitted. "After 15 years of being treated like I don't matter, why should I disrupt our peace to rescue them? They never supported my dreams. They excluded me from every significant family event. They criticized this house without ever seeing it." Jackson nodded, listening without judgment. "But another part of me," I continued, "another part knows I'm not them. I don't want to make decisions from a place of hurt or revenge. And practically speaking, the guest wing is separate enough that we could maintain boundaries." We talked for hours, weighing options, exploring emotions, and setting potential parameters. By evening, we had reached a decision that felt true to who we were while protecting the life we had built. I called Thomas back the next morning. "You can stay temporarily," I said without preamble. "The guest wing has 2 bedrooms and its own living area. But there will be ground rules, and this isn't an open-ended arrangement. 3 months maximum while you figure out next steps." His relief was palpable. "Thank you, Evelyn. You have no idea what this means. We can leave immediately. The electricity in our house is being shut off tomorrow anyway." "I'll email you the address and gate code," I replied, still processing the reality of what I had agreed to. "Let me know when you'll arrive so we can be prepared." 2 days later, I stood on my front steps, watching a sedan with Illinois plates navigate the long driveway to my home. The car that had once been my father's pride, a luxury German import, had apparently been replaced by a modest rental. It was the first tangible sign that everything Thomas had told me was true. The 3 figures that emerged from the car were almost unrecognizable. My father, once imposing in his tailored suits and commanding presence, looked diminished in jeans and a worn sweater. My mother, who had maintained a meticulous appearance throughout my childhood, seemed to have aged a decade. Her hair no longer professionally colored, her posture stooped. Thomas, without his usual air of superiority, moved like a man carrying an invisible weight. Their expressions as they took in the house, the soaring glass walls, the architectural lighting highlighting native stone features, the panoramic ocean view showed a mixture of awe and discomfort. This was the home they had dismissed sight unseen, now their only option for shelter. "Welcome," I said, simply holding the door open. "Let me show you to your rooms." The first days of this unexpected living arrangement were fraught with tension. My parents moved through the house like cautious visitors in a museum, afraid to touch anything or make noise. Thomas spent hours on his laptop in the guest room, emerging only for meals which were taken in awkward silence broken by stilted attempts at small talk. Jackson, ever perceptive, created reasons to be out of the house during the day, giving me space to navigate this bizarre reunion on my own terms. "Text if you need reinforcements," he whispered each morning before leaving for his office. The physical contrast between their former lives and their current reality seemed to hit my parents hardest. My mother, who had once hosted elaborate dinner parties in her formal dining room, now sat at my sustainable bamboo breakfast bar looking lost. My father, who had commanded boardrooms, was reduced to asking permission to use the coffee maker. The turning point came unexpectedly during the second week. I was working in my home office when a delivery arrived, advance copies of a design magazine featuring one of my firm's recent projects on the cover. The messenger needed a signature, and my father happened to be in the entryway when the doorbell rang. I emerged from my office to find him staring at the magazine, my name and photo prominently displayed with the headline, Evelyn Barrett, Redefining Sustainable Luxury for the Modern Era. "This is you," he said, his voice carrying a note of surprise I hadn't heard before. "Yes," I replied simply. "That's me." Something shifted in his expression, a reluctant recognition that perhaps had been long overdue. He handed me the magazine without further comment, but that evening at dinner he asked about the project featured on the cover. Cautiously, I explained the challenges of the design, a cliffside vacation home that needed to withstand severe weather while minimizing environmental impact. As I spoke, I noticed my mother watching with an attention she had never given my career before. "And people pay you well for this?" my father asked, the banker in him still measuring success in financial terms. "Very well," I confirmed. "My firm has a waiting list of clients willing to pay premium rates for sustainable luxury design." The revelation that I wasn't just successful but financially thriving seemed to fundamentally alter how they saw me. It was both satisfying and sad that after all this time, monetary success was what finally earned their attention. The following Sunday, I returned from a morning beach walk to find my mother in the kitchen chopping vegetables. "I thought I'd make dinner tonight," she said tentatively, "to thank you for everything, if that's all right." It was the first genuine gesture she had made, and despite my lingering hurt, I recognized it for the olive branch it was. "That would be nice," I replied. "Can I help?" We worked side by side preparing a meal, and for the first time in my adult life, conversation with my mother flowed without underlying tension. She asked about how Jackson and I had met, listened attentively to the story, and shared a few anecdotes from her early days with my father. "He wasn't always so rigid," she said softly as we set the table. "Life hardened him, made him afraid of anything uncertain, including your choices." It wasn't an apology, not quite, but it was an acknowledgement that had been missing for decades. The real breakthrough came a few days later when my father wandered into the hallway where I displayed my professional awards and recognitions. I found him standing before the wall, studying each plaque and certificate with an intensity that suggested he was truly seeing them for the first time. When he noticed me watching, something unexpected happened. His eyes filled with tears. "I was wrong," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I was so wrong about you, Evelyn." The words I had waited half my life to hear landed with a complexity of emotion I wasn't prepared for. Before I could respond, he continued. "I was so certain about what success looked like, what the right path was. I couldn't see that you were blazing your own trail, and a brilliant one at that." He gestured at the wall of achievements. "I missed everything. I missed you." The raw honesty of his admission broke something open between us. We sat in the living room with the ocean spread before us and began the first real conversation we'd had since I was a teenager. He spoke of his own father's rigid expectations, the fear of financial insecurity that had driven his every decision, the collapse of everything he had built. "I thought I was protecting you by pushing you toward what I saw as security," he explained. "I couldn't understand that your vision was actually more secure than mine ever was, because it was built on passion and innovation, not fear." Over the following weeks, these conversations expanded to include my mother and eventually Thomas. At my suggestion, we began meeting with a family therapist who specialized in estrangement and reconciliation. Dr. Morales came to the house twice weekly, guiding us through the painful excavation of 15 years of hurt, misunderstanding, and missed opportunities. "Your family system was built on rigid roles and narrow definitions of success," she explained during one session. "When Evelyn stepped outside those parameters, the system didn't know how to accommodate her without changing, so it excluded her instead." My mother wept upon hearing this assessment. "I failed you," she said, looking directly at me, for perhaps the first time. "I was supposed to protect you, to support you. Instead, I chose the comfort of the familiar over my own daughter." Thomas's journey was perhaps the most surprising. Initially defensive about his role in my exclusion, he gradually opened up about his own resentments and insecurities. "You were always the creative one, the one with vision," he admitted during a particularly intense therapy session. "I was just following the path laid out for me. When you succeeded on your own terms, it made me question every choice I'd made. It was easier to dismiss your achievements than to face my own doubts." As these emotional walls began to crumble, practical matters also shifted. Through my professional network, I connected Thomas with a commercial real estate firm looking for someone with financial expertise. His experience, even with the recent setbacks, made him a valuable candidate, and he secured a position that would allow him to rebuild his career outside of traditional banking. My father, humbled by his financial collapse, but still possessing decades of business knowledge, began consulting with my firm's financial manager to strengthen our investment strategies. It gave him purpose and a way to contribute positively to my life for the first time. My mother, whose teaching background had been sidelined for years in favor of her role as a banker's wife, discovered a passion for the Japanese garden I had created on the property. Her careful tending of the space became a metaphor for our slowly healing relationship, patient, attentive, allowing natural growth without forcing outcomes. The 3-month timeline we had initially set came and went. My parents found a modest apartment in Seattle close enough for regular visits, but maintaining the healthy separation we all recognized was necessary. Thomas, with his new position secured, found a small house nearby and began the delicate work of rebuilding his relationship with Amanda and their children. 1 year after their unexpected arrival on my doorstep, we gathered in my home again, not as desperate refugees, but as invited guests for the first holiday meal I had ever hosted for my birth family. Jackson and I had extended the invitation to include Amanda and the children, as well as close friends who had become our chosen family over the years. Standing in the kitchen watching my mother teach Jasmine her secret recipe for cranberry sauce, while my father and Professor Wilson debated sustainable building materials, I felt a sense of completion I had never expected to experience. Thomas's children played on the deck with the daughter of one of my colleagues, their laughter carrying through the open doors. Jackson came up behind me, slipping his arms around my waist. "You okay?" he murmured. "I am," I replied, surprised by how true it was. "This isn't a perfect fairy tale ending. There's still hurt, still caution, but it's a beginning I never thought was possible." Later that evening, after the guests had departed, and only my immediate family remained, my father raised his glass in a toast. "To Evelyn," he said, his voice steady, but his eyes bright with emotion, "who had the courage to build not just a stunning home, but a life of integrity and purpose. Thank you for sharing both with us, even when we didn't deserve it." As the sun set over the Pacific, casting golden light through the windows of the home I had created, I realized the journey had come full circle. The house that my family had once mocked had become the setting for our healing. The success they had dismissed had become their safety net in crisis. The independence they had criticized had given me the strength to offer forgiveness without compromising my boundaries. On my ocean view deck, watching waves crash against the shore in their timeless rhythm, I found myself reflecting on the lessons of this unexpected chapter. True family, I had learned, was not defined by blood alone, but by mutual respect, celebration of each other's authentic selves, and the willingness to grow together through both success and failure. The path to healing had not been quick or simple. It required honest acknowledgement of past wrongs, genuine efforts to understand each other's perspectives, and the courage to build new patterns of interaction. Most importantly, it demanded that all of us let go of rigid expectations and embrace the beautiful uncertainty of authentic relationships. I thought of my grandmother Lillian, whose belief in me had planted the seeds for everything I had become. "Follow your light," she had told me. That light had led me not just to professional success, but to this moment of peace with my past and hope for the future. Sometimes the longest journeys bring us exactly where we need to be, though rarely in the way we expect. My 15-year exile from family had given me the space to become fully myself. Their 15-year rejection had ultimately led them to a deeper understanding of what truly matters. And together, we were learning that it's never too late to build something new from the foundations of what was broken. Have you ever had to rebuild a relationship after years of misunderstanding or hurt? What helped you move forward? Share your experiences in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video if my story resonated with you. Thank you for listening, and remember that sometimes the most beautiful structures rise from the most challenging foundations.